So today we are going to be looking at capital budgeting, and yes, I will expect that you are there with your written material so that you can jot down one or two things while I'm explaining. So under this topic, we are going to look at, of course, the introduction to capital budgeting. We are going to talk about procedures involved in capital budgeting decision. Then thereafter, we are going to learn about uh, features or characteristics of capital budgeting. Then next one will be to discuss the project evaluation methods. Okay, project evaluation methods, under which we are going to talk about discounted and non-discounted cash flow methods. Then we're also going to talk about the areas of conflicts between decision of net present value and then the internal rate of return. Then once we are done with the explanation of all the relevant techniques, then we'll then move to explanation or discussion on relevant cash flow, how to identify relevant cash flow. Okay. Then after that, we move to inflation, impact of inflation and taxation in investment appraisal. Once we are done with that, then I will provide you with the columnar formats which you are expected to use at this level on the day of your exam. When you have question under capital budgeting. Okay, so without wasting more time, let's take it one by one. What do you understand by capital budgeting? Capital budgeting is also known as investment appraisal, capital expenditure, or capital investment. Okay, it represents the process by which an organization commits its funds into long-term projects. When you say long-term projects, what we simply means the long-term projects are projects that span over one accounting period. Any project that will last for more than 12 months represent capital budgets, capital budgeting. Therefore, examples of capital budgeting include, or capital expenditure or capital investments include the construction of roads, construction of dams, construction of bridges, construction of refineries, okay, refinery, power plants, office building, and all of that. It is expected that the management of a company will always embark on project that is capable, or a project that will enable the company to increase the value of the business, because it is believed that once a company is able to create value for the business, then the value of the owners will also be increased. So it is expected that the management of the company will embark on projects that will be able to increase the value of the company, which will invariably maximize the wealth of the owners using relevant investment appraisal techniques. Okay, now it is not sufficient for company to have investment opportunity and just commit its limited scarce financial resources on them without going forward to going further to appraise and ascertain the financial viability of the business, because the primary purpose of capital investment decision is to ascertain the financial viability of the project. The company wants to know, management wants to know whether the project is financially worthwhile or viable, whether they can go ahead and invest their money, because the financial resources is scarce. All right. So you want to ensure that this project will be able to create value for the company, knowing fully well that the primary purpose of the business is to maximize the wealth of the owners. So any projects that will increase the value of the business will be capable of increasing the value, increasing the wealth of the owners. So that is as per that. Then we need to talk about the steps involved in capital budgeting decision. What are the procedures you need to embark on whenever you want to carry out capital budgeting decision? There are about 6 of them. One is the identification of viable projects, okay? Identification of viable projects. There are lots of activities that will go into the identification of viable projects. Usually, there is a department within an organization that is responsible for scanning the business environment to be able to identify the investable opportunities. All right. Departments such as marketing or research and development, they are the one endowed with the responsibility to scan the business environment to be able to identify the project's opportunity or investment opportunity. Okay. So there are a whole lot of activities that will go into that, but I don't want to go too much into details. The issue is that once an opportunity has been identified, there will be need for the company to ascertain the financial viability of that opportunity, of that investment opportunity, which should now take us to the second step. The second procedure under capital budgeting decision is evaluation of projects, evaluation of projects. So this is where all of you have responsibility. As a finance person, it is your responsibility. This is where you have key responsibility. Either you are a finance director, finance manager, finance supervisor, financial analyst, chief financial officer, whatever your responsibility, this is your department. So you will need to appraise the project that has been so identified in step one in order to ascertain its financial viability using relevant investment appraisal technique. So once the project has been appraised, and if it is financially viable, we need to the finance department will need to get back to the management. Even if the project is not viable, you still need to go back to the management and give them the upshot of your analysis. All right, there will be a meeting will be convened to discuss, the management meeting will be convened to discuss the upshot, the report from this analysis. So the finance director is the head of that department. He will be the one that will be demonstrating to the management, giving them the feedback on the analysis that the finance department has carried out. So if the project is financially viable, then management will need to give it a good to go. That will take us to the third step. The third step is authorization and approval of project. The third procedure is authorization and approval of a project. All right. So at this stage, since the project has been approved by the relevant management at the relevant management level, so there will be need for the company to mobilize contractors that will execute the job. All right. So you need to mobilize because there is management approval. What that means is that the project is good to go. And then at this point, even if there is an approval, if the financial resources is not readily available or is inadequate, or the company is still sourcing for the money, you cannot commence projects until you have the budget available. You have the capacity to start the project. Other than that, the project can be delayed. All right, can be delayed due to financial resources. But if the financial resources is available, then that will take us to the step 4, which is the developing and execution of a project. Developing and execution of project. It is at this stage that you need to mobilize the contractor. This at this stage that you need to mobilize these contractors to commence the job. To commence the contracts. In that case, at this point, the contractor will need to mobilize people and equipment to sites and to commence the project. Then, of course, once that is done, we need to go to step 5, which is monitoring and controlling of projects. Step 5 is monitoring and controlling of projects. So it is not sufficient for the company to have put forward the financial resources to commence the project or to execute the project. The company needs to monitor the activities of the contractor and also the people on site to be sure that the right thing is being done. So at this stage of monitoring of projects, the company will need to have its own representative on site to ensure that the contractor is doing the right thing. What the contractor has quoted in the contracts is what that is doing, where you are supposed to have mix of capital, mix of materials. Say, for example, you are saying that you want to use 100 bags of cement, for example, and then if your own person is, if your own representative is not there on site, there is certainty that the contractor may want to cut corners, all right, because an average contractor will want to follow shortcuts in order to increase his own margin on the contract. So you must ensure that you have the right person and people on site to monitor the activities of the contractor. Not only that, you must be sure there are different kinds of personnel that will be representing the company on site. We are going to have safety people, you are going to have security people, you're also going to have engineers that will be monitoring the activity of the people on site, because you want to ensure that the safety of the personnel on site is top-notch. You want to ensure that nobody gets hurt, okay? You need to ensure that nobody gets hurt, because God forbid, if as a result of the project activity, there is fatality on site, it may erode the image or reputation of the company. So in order to guide against that, you must have your own safety personnel on site that will need to monitor and control the people on site to ensure that they are doing the right thing, the right PPE, the right equipment that they said they have quoted in their contract that they are going to use. That is what they are using. Not only that, where every company has its own safety policy, where especially when it has to do with construction activities, where you are saying that you are going to have, maybe when you are working at sites, when you are working at heights, okay, maybe when you have about the first floor, the second floor, when you are working at height, there is a right equipment you are supposed to use. So how do you ensure that the contractor is doing that? And it is because if you don't have people on site, contractor may use another equipment that is not suitable for that kind of activity. So this is where you have people. That is why it is important for you to have representative on site to monitor the activity of the people. And not only that, you also need to monitor your costs. You need to monitor and control your costs, because the financial resources is limited, is not always sufficient. So you need to ensure that your financial resources is judiciously and efficiently put into use. So by so doing, you need to monitor your budget. As of today, how much have you spent versus what you say you are going to spend? What is the project status? When are you supposed to complete this job? How much have you budgeted for each year on the contract? Okay, how do you ensure that you don't overspend your budget? How do you ensure that, okay, your budgets, the project activity, the project cost is consistent with your budget? Not only that, certainly there will be variance, okay, because this is also where you have responsibility as an accounting person in your own department. So you need to monitor the actual spend versus what you have budgeted for. If you're about to go above your budget, you need to inform the management on a regular basis, especially on a monthly basis. You need to go back to the management and explain to them the project status, so that you tell them the trend of project spend. What are the activities that are driving the project? All this, the management is interested, they want to know. So if you want to go above your budget, it may well be that it is another level of management that will do the approval, depending on the size of the organization. But irrespective, at all time, you have to give justification. The reason why you are above your budget, the reason why you are below, whether you are below or above your budget, you must give justification. So at the end of the day, of course, it may well be that if you are spending, or you want to spend above your budget, it may well be that there's a change in scope. Okay, there's a change in scope. possibly there's something that is not within the contract before. Now you have introduced it, you want to do it. As a result, that will, that will involve a cost. Okay, it will involve money. So at this point, so there's tendency for you to go above your budget. Again, you may also, if you also go below your budget, you also need to explain that. You need to give justification. It may well be that there's something you have in the scope of the contract before. Now that you are not doing that scope again, you want to remove it. Once you remove it, that will lower your costs. Not only that, if there's a change in, if there's an extension of time, that will also result to you being to resort to extra costs being incurred. So as a result, you may likely go above your budget. But in any case, the importance of monitoring and controlling of costs is the fact that you want to ensure that you stay within the budget so that you don't outshoot your spend. All right. So it is important for you to monitor and control your budget to ensure that the budget is not exceeded. Then the last one is post-completion investigation. Post-completion investigation or audit. The beauty of post-completion investigation is that you want to ensure that the objective at which the project is being set up has been achieved. Therefore, it is also possible during the course of executing the project or during the course of developing the project, there will be lessons learned. Okay, there will be lessons learned and an experience gained. So it is important for the company to document the mistakes, okay, and how the mistake was resolved. All right, how the mistake was corrected, so that when you want to execute similar projects in the future, you can easily fall back to those mistakes you have, to those lessons you have learned in the past, so that you don't repeat similar mistake in the future. And of course, it is possible that project manager will certainly make mistake within during the course of the project. However, it is important to ensure that that error or mistake is corrected. Once it is corrected, then you document it for future reference. And not only that, it is possible that there is a defect in the job that the contractor has done. Therefore, you need to call the contractor to come and fix the defect, and that's why in any contracts, you usually have retention fee. Okay, that's why you usually have retention fee. Retention fee is just a small percentage of the contract price that is retained until a specified future date. It could be 6 months, it could be 3 months, it could be 1 year, it could be more than 1 year, depending on the agreement between the two parties, that is the company and the contractor. So, because if you pay 100% to the contractor, there will be no motivation for such a contractor to come back when there's a defect. But once you retain that, immediately if you call, they will want to come and to correct the defects. And this is one of the things that post-completion investigation is trying to achieve. All right. So these are the procedures involved in capital budgeting decisions. Please read them through. So that you have deep understanding. Then the characteristics of capital budgeting, I don't want to waste time on this, and it's something you can read on your own, but they are just very straightforward. When you talk about features of capital budgeting, one feature is that it involves huge capital outlay. A large sum of money is required to undertake capital budgeting activity. Okay, it is also considered to be very risky. Capital budgeting is considered to be very risky. The reason being that mostly because these financial resources is not readily available. It's not always adequate. Therefore, you want to ensure that your limited scarce financial resources is being used judiciously. So as a result, what if the objective at which the project is being undertaken is not achieved? All right, that's a risk. What if the projects your financial resources which you have committed on the project will not yield the requisites or the required returns. All right. So it's also a risk that the company will not be able to earn the anticipated return on the project. Not only that, capital budgeting also involves irreversible decision. Okay, it involves irreversible decision because once you embark on it, you cannot say you are not doing again because there is a contract that binds the two parties, the company and the contractor. So if you say you are not going to do it again, you must be ready to pay compensation to the other party. Because if you refuse to pay compensation, there will be litigation. Okay, there will be litigation because the contractor will tell you as a company that he has borrowed money, he has rented equipment and with interest and all of that. So if you say you are not going to pay, you are not going to do again, then you have to pay me the money that I've used to rent the equipment and the tools that we are using on site. I have to settle the contractors, the workers I have on staff. So many things will involve. But if the company refused, then that is when there will be litigation because the other party will want to file a case in order uh, to remedy the damage. All right, to remedy the damage. So of course, another benefit or another characteristic of capital budgeting is that the benefit will accrue over a long period of time. Okay, the benefit will accrue over a long period of time. At the beginning, the company may not benefit anything, may not earn any benefit from the project, but in the long run, there will surely be a positive cash flows that the project will generate. So you can read them through the characteristics. Where we have major work is the project evaluation method. Okay, where you have major work is the project evaluation method. So let's talk about methods of project appraiser. Okay, let's talk about methods of project appraiser. There are basically two methods of project evaluation, including one, discounted cash flow method, two, non-discounted cash flow method. When you talk about discounted cash flow method, it is a method of appraiser that consider timing of cash flow and the time value of money. I repeat, the discounted cash flow method is a method that takes into consideration the timing of cash flow and the time value of money. Examples of discounted cash flow method include net present value, internal rate of return, modified internal rate of return, project duration, discounted payback period, profitability index, benefit cost ratio, as well as adjusted present value. So these are the methods under discounted cash flow method. Then what do you understand by non-discounted cash flow method? The non-discounted cash flow method is also known as traditional method of investment appraisal or conventional method. It is a method that does not take into consideration the timing of cash flow and the time value of money. Examples include the techniques under non-discounted cash flow method include one, payback period, two, accounting rate of return. So those are the two methods under the non-discounted cash flow method. So at this point, we are going to take it one by one, starting from the net present value. Okay, we are starting from the net present value. What do you understand by net present value? Net present value is a technique that consider the timing of cash flow and the time value of money. When you say time value of money simply means that the value of 1 naira of today is worth more than the value of 1 naira of tomorrow. I repeat, the time value of money connotes that the value of 1 naira of today is worth more than the value of 1 naira of tomorrow. Why is it so? Because of price level changes, because of inflation, and the investor's preference to have their benefit now rather than delaying into the future. All right. So that is why the value of 1 naira of today is worth more than the value of 1 naira of tomorrow. Therefore, NPV is defined as the difference between the present value of cash inflow and present value of cash outflow in capital investments. I repeat, NPV represents the difference between the present value of cash inflow and present value of cash outflow in capital investments. Of all investment appraisal techniques, the net present value is adjudged to be the overall investment appraisal technique. I repeat, of all investment appraisal techniques, NPV criterion is adjudged to be the overall, okay? So because NPV is a technique that is consistent with the shareholders' wealth maximization objective. We said that when you want to appraise a project using net present value, and if the project is positive, okay, the project should be accepted. Should be accepted. So in that case, once the project is positive, it means the value of the business will be created. Will increase. If the value of the business increase, then the wealth of the owner will also increase. And that is one reason why NPV is adjudged to be the overall investment appraisal technique, because it is consistent with the shareholders' wealth maximization objective. So how do you then calculate net present value? Remember, I said that net present value is the difference between present value of cash inflow and present value of cash outflow in capital investment. So when you want to calculate your NPV, you need to discount the future cash flow that the project will generate. You also discount the cash outflow which you want to spend on the project. So the difference between the present value of cash inflow and the present value of cash outflow will give you the NPV, either positive or negative NPV. But specifically, we can use format or formula to calculate our NPV. Let me see if I have a, yes. Let me demonstrate for you. If you want to, you don't have the formula in the material, but I can do that for you. So if you want to calculate NPV, we said net present value using formula. Using formula, we said NPV, net present value, is calculated as present value of cash inflow minus PV, present value of cash outflow. That will give you net present value. This is not sufficient. So I need to break it down. I can then say NPV is equal to, for me to get the present value of cash inflow, I need to take the summation of the cash flow, summation of the cash flow of the first year, discounted by the cost of capital in the first year. Let me write that to create more space. Okay. Sorry about that. It's not connecting, that's why. Okay then. So 1 plus the cost of capital of year 1 plus the cash flow of year 2 divided by 1 plus the cost of capital of year 2 on and on until the final year. Then when you get to the final year, of course, plus the cash flow of the final year divided by 1 plus cost of capital, discount factor of the final year. So when you have this, you need to less it out from the present value of cash outflow, which is your initial outlay, CO. So the difference between the present value of cash inflow and present value of cash outflow will give you your net present value. This is the formula for calculating NPV. The CF is the cash flow of the respective years, year 1, year 2, year 3, whatever the useful life of the project. R is the company's cost of capital. Then N is the useful life of the project. CO is the initial outlay or present value of cash outflow. Okay, CO is the present value of cash outflow. So using formula method, this is how to calculate your net present value. If you want to use tabular method, we have used this one under cost of capital, so it's not new to you. In fact, at this stage, at this level, you can't be struggling to understand how to calculate net present value. So this using tabular method, this is how to calculate NPV. But the most important thing is that when you're calculating your net present value, you must first of all consider the present value of cash inflow. Okay, you add up the present value of cash inflow, then you net it off from the present value of cash outflow. Whatever you have thereafter will give you your NPV. From this hypothetical table, you will see that the cost of capital of the company is 10%. We are told that this project will generate 550 naira in the first year. The project will also generate 615 in the second year. Therefore, then I need to go and calculate discount factor of the first year at 10%, which gave us a 0.909. Year 2, 0.826. When you multiply, you get your PV. You add up the present value of cash inflow, which is 1,008, then minus 1,000. That's how we got the 8 we are seeing there. If I want to use formula method, it's the same thing I'm going to get. Using formula, for example, if I want to use formula, I would then say net present value using the formula we have underneath. I would then say equal cash flow of year 1 is 550. I will say 550 divided by discount factor of year 1. My discount factor 1 plus R. R is 10%. So that will be 1.1 raised to power year 1. Okay, raised to power year 1 plus cash flow of year 2, which is 615 divided by 1.1 raised to power year 2. Year 2 is the final year. Therefore, I don't need to stress myself. I would then say minus cash flow of year 0, cash outflow. Cash outflow is 1,000. Okay, cash outflow is 1,000. So minus 1,000. All right. Then I would then say NPV equal to, I will bring up my calculator. I'll bring up my calculator to say 1.1 raised to power 1, 1.1 raised to power 1.1 raised to power 1 equal. I got 1.1, okay, multiply by 550. Sorry, 550 divided by 1.1. So this will be 550 divided by 1.1 equal 500 naira. Here I have 500 plus, I will go to the second year. 1.1 raised to power 2 equal, that's 1.21. Therefore, I have 615, 615 divided by 1.21 equal 508. I have 508.26. Here is 508.26. Forget about the points. So minus 1,000. So when I add up, this one will give me 1,008 minus 1,000. So this is equal to 8. My NPV is equal to 8. So whether I use formula or I use tabular method to calculate my NPV, I'm supposed to get the same answer, except with rounding error, because if I rounded my my discount factor, so you are going to have a little difference. So this is how to calculate net present value. So now let's talk about decision rule under net present value. What are the decision rule? For independent projects, accepts if NPV is positive. For independent project, accepts if NPV is positive. If NPV is negative, then you reject the project. If the NPV, provided the NPV is positive, it means the project is financially viable. What if the NPV is equal to 0? If the NPV is equal to 0, then the company has the option to either accept or reject the project based on other qualitative factors, okay? Then, what about mutually exclusive projects? For mutually exclusive projects, accept any project with a higher positive NPV. I repeat, for mutually exclusive projects, accept any project with a higher positive NPV. So, what do you mean by independent projects? What is independent project? What is mutually exclusive project? An independent project is a standalone project that may be accepted or rejected based on its own merits. I repeat, an independent project is a standalone project that may be accepted or rejected based on its own merits. Okay? What this means is that if the project is financially viable, if the project has a positive NPV, the project could be accepted. That's an independent project. It's only one project, it's a standalone. If the project has a positive NPV, we accept it. But if negative NPV, we reject it. Okay? Then what do you understand by mutually exclusive projects? A mutually exclusive project is a competing project. Mutually exclusive projects are competing projects in which the acceptance of one will preclude the acceptance of the other. I repeat, mutually exclusive projects are competing projects in which the acceptance of one will preclude the acceptance of the other. This means that mutually exclusive projects are projects that cannot be accepted together. It means that if one project is accepted, the other project must be rejected. For example, where project A and B are mutually exclusive. If project A is accepted, project B must be rejected. If project B is accepted, project A must be rejected. That is what is called mutually exclusive projects. In relation to NPV, there are advantages and disadvantages. At this level, examiner cannot be asking you what is advantages and disadvantages of NPV. Please do well to go through them. Read them through and have the understanding of that. So I can't be coming to the class and be telling you it's an absolute measure of profitability. It's considered the whole life of I can't be telling you all of that at this level. All right. So please read them through. Let's move to the next one, which is internal rate of return. Remember, our approach is to explain all the underlying principles for all the techniques before we begin any calculation. So let's go to the second one, which is internal rate of return. What is internal rate of return? The internal rate of return is also known as break-even rate of return, market discount rates, yield to maturity, okay? Yield to maturity. It is the rate that equates NPV of the future cash flow to 0, okay? It's the rate that equates the present value of the future cash flow to 0. The internal rate of return relies heavily on the use of trial and error method, okay? It relies heavily on the use of trial and error method of calculating the NPV. Okay, it relies heavily on the trial and error method of calculating NPV for the purpose of calculating the internal rate of return. So when calculating internal rate of return, there are two procedures you must undertake. One is to assume two discount rates that will produce two opposing NPV. I repeat, when calculating internal rate of return, the first step you need to do is to assume two discount rates that will produce two opposing NPV. One discount rate will produce a positive NPV. Another discount rate will produce a negative NPV. Then the results, you now interpolate the result into the internal rate of return formula. Step 2 is to calculate internal rate of return using this formula you have there. A is the lower discount rate. B is the higher discount rate. Okay, remember you assume two discount rates. One will give you a positive NPV, then the other one will give you a negative NPV. Therefore, once you calculate your internal rate of return, then of course you need to advise whether the project should be undertaken. Then that will take us to decision rule under internal rate of return. I don't want to waste too much of a time on this because we have done this, we have used this formula under cost of capital to calculate cost of redeemable preference share. We also use it to calculate cost of redeemable debts. Okay. So, but again, it's good to mention it at this stage. All right. So, what is the decision rule under internal rate of return? For independent projects, you accept if IRR is greater than the company cost of capital. I repeat, for independent projects, accept if IRR is greater than the company cost of capital. B, for mutually exclusive projects, accept any project with a higher IRR, provided it is greater than the company cost of capital. I repeat, for mutually exclusive projects, accept any projects with a higher IRR, provided it is greater than the company cost of capital. So that is the decision rule under internal rate of return. For you, for the acceptability of any projects using internal rate of return, you are going to benchmark the calculated IRR with the company cost of capital. It is worthy to note that when you are calculating internal rate of return, you don't use the company cost of capital. You are the one that will assume to discount rate. And that's one of the limitations of IRR because it is subjective. You are the one that assume the two discount rate that you're going to use to compute your NPV, positive and negative. All right. So you don't use the company cost of capital to do that. However, it is possible after you have assumed one discount rate and you are given the company cost of capital, it is possible that okay, maybe the company cost of capital is within the second discount rate that you want to assume. You may use that. But what is important is that whenever you want to calculate your internal rate of return, you are the one that will assume the two discount rates that will produce two opposing NPV. Move on to the next one. We are done with NPV. We are done with explanation of internal rate of return. Let's talk about areas of conflict between net present value and then the internal rate of return. Before we proceed to another technique, let's discuss areas of conflict between NPV and then the internal rate of return. Now, when there are mutually exclusive projects, I repeat, when there are mutually exclusive projects, the decision of NPV may be conflicting with the decision of internal rate of return. NPV may favor a particular project and internal rate of return may suggest another project. So this is an apparent conflict. So you need to know what is causing the conflict. Then how can you resolve the conflict? There are three key areas, or there are three key factors or reasons that are causing the conflict between decision of NPV and decision of internal rate of return when there are mutually exclusive projects. Because when there's an independent project, when there's a standalone project, the decision of NPV will be consistent with the decision of internal rate of return. It's a given. However, where you have mutually exclusive projects, the decision of NPV will surely conflict with the decision of internal rate of return. So what is causing the conflicts? Number one causes of conflicts. Let me use hypothetical numbers to explain this. Let me find the space. Okay, I can see small space here. Now, when you want to explain, in case the examiner is asking you to explain the reasons why there are conflicts between decision of NPV and the internal rate of return. Now, say you have project A, you also have project B. The initial outlay of project A, say, is 500 million naira. Initial outlay of project B is 800 million naira. Let's say the cash flow for the respective years. Year one for project A is 300. Here is 100. Year two, 150. Let me make it 200. Here is 200. Here is 250. $150. Year three for project A is 150. Here is 250. Year four dash 300. Year five 350. So these are the cash flows for both projects, project A and B. Now, when you want to explain areas of conflicts between decision of NPV and decision of internal rate of return, the first item we are going to talk about is where there is a significant difference in the amount of capital outlay. I repeat, one reasons for conflicts causes of conflicts between NPV and internal rate of return. One, where there is significant difference in the amount of capital outlay, okay? That may result to the reason why NPV favor a particular project, then internal rate of return favor another project. What do I mean by where there's significant difference in the amount of capital outlay? From these hypothetical numbers, you will see that in year zero, the initial outlay of project A is 500 million, whereas the initial outlay of project B is 800 million. There's a significant difference of 300 million naira. So in this case, the decision of NPV may be conflicting with the decision of internal rate of return. So where there's a significant difference in the amount of capital outlay, it may cause the conflict between the two techniques. Number two, where there is difference in patterns of cash inflow, okay? Where there is difference in patterns of cash inflow. What do I mean by patterns of cash inflow? You will see that from these hypothetical numbers, in year one, from year one up to year three, you see the pattern of cash inflow of project A. In year one, project A generates 300 million. In year two, 200. In year three, 150. In a gradual form or in a declining rate. But look at project B. Initially, in year one, project B generated 100 million and increased up to 350 in year 5. You will notice that the discount factor at the earlier part of the projects of any project is usually higher than the discount factor at the latter part. So what this means is that any project with a higher cash inflow at the earlier part may be favored over the other project. For example, the discount factor of this project is 10%. In year 1, this will give a discount factor of 0.909, 0.826, 0.751, 0.683, then 0.621. You will see that in the earlier parts, we have a higher discount factor. So what that means, look at project A that has 300 million. So that means at the earlier parts, the present value of that project that has a higher cash inflow will be higher than the present value of the project with a lower cash inflow. All right. So where there's difference in pattern of cash inflow, that may result to a conflict between NPV and then the internal rate of return. Then number three causes of conflict between NPV and internal rate of return is where there's difference in useful life that. So where there is difference in useful life of a project or project sizes, it may result to conflict between decision of NPV and the decision of internal rate of return. So in case you are asked to explain this, the causes or the reasons for conflict between NPV and internal rate of return, these are the things you are going to be talking about. Therefore, how do you then resolve the conflict? How do you resolve the conflict between NPV and then the internal rate of return? So when there's a conflict between decision of NPV and then the internal rate of return, the decision should be based on net present value. I repeat, when there's a conflict between NPV and other techniques of investment appraisal, the decision should always, including internal rate of return, the decision should always be based on net present value, except examiner says otherwise. This is because the net present value is an absolute measure of profitability. I repeat, this is because the NPV is an absolute measure of profitability, and it is a technique or it's a decision criterion that is consistent with the shareholders' wealth maximization objective, because it is believed that a positive NPV will increase the value of the business and which will invariably maximize or which will invariably increase the shareholders' equity value. All right. So this is the reason why your decision should always be based on the net present value. In theory, not in practice. To ascertain the financial viability of a project, you need nobody to tell you that you are supposed to use the net present value, except if examiner says otherwise. Other than that, it has to be based on the net present value. I repeat, because NPV is a measure of profitability, and a positive NPV will increase the value of the business and which will invariably maximize the wealth of the owners. That is why your decision should always be based on the net present value. So I think I have that above, so you can just go there. So you go through all of this. What I just said to you are all written there. So go there and read them through. All right? Read them through. So let's talk about modified internal rate of return. Let's talk about modified internal rate of return. So let me pause a little bit before we continue. Let me hear from you if you have any question for me. Talk to me. Okay. Do you have any questions so far? Or I should proceed? Okay, then. So let's continue. So let's talk about modified internal rate of return. When there are unconventional cash flows are irregular cash flows, such that, say, in the first year, for example, in the first year, you may have a positive cash flow. Okay. In the first year, you may have a positive cash flow. In the second year, you may have a negative cash flow. In the third year, you also have a positive cash flow, on and on like that. So they are kind of a mix of positive and negative. So that represents unconventional cash flows or irregular cash flows. So when there are unconventional cash flow, it is not always appropriate to use internal rate of return as a decision criterion. This is because it will surely be conflicting with the decision of NPV. And if it conflicts with the decision of NPV, it will not be consistent it will not be in consonance with the shareholders' wealth maximization objective. So generally, the assumption behind NPV is that the cash flow to be generated by the projects will be reinvested at the company cost of capital. I repeat, the assumptions behind NPV is that cash flow generated by the project will be reinvested at the company cost of capital. But internal rate of return suggests that cash flow generated or to be generated by the project should be reinvested at internal rate of return. This is also a conflict. So in order to correct the anomalies associated with the internal rate of return, the modified internal rate of return was developed. Okay, the modified internal rate of return was developed. So the modified internal rate of return allows the decision maker to specify a different reinvestment rates for each receipt and payments associated with the project. So you can the technique will allow the decision maker to specify the reinvestment rate to be used for the receipt and payments associated with the project, such that the modified internal rate of return is consistent with the assumptions of internal rate of, with the assumption of net present value, such that the assumption that says that the cash flow generated by the project should be reinvested elsewhere at the company cost of capital. So the same thing modified internal rate of return is suggesting, because of the fact that internal rate of return is conflicting with NPV, that is why this modified internal rate of return was developed to correct that anomalies, such that the future cash flow that the project is expected to generate can be reinvested elsewhere at the company cost of capital, okay, at the company cost of capital. So that is for introduction to modify internal rate of return. Then how do you calculate modified internal rate of return? There are you have about 3 formulas that I can provide that we can use to calculate modified internal rate of return. However, you need to understand some basic things when it comes to calculating modified internal rate of return. If I like, I can use present value method to calculate my modified internal rate of return. If I like, I can use terminal value method to calculate my modified internal rate of return. Let me find the space. Let me use it. Or let me go back there and clean what I have here. Now, for example, if I want to calculate modify internal rate of return, like I said, I can either use terminal value method or I use present value method. So if I want to use terminal value method, using terminal value method, using terminal value method, there are two procedures I'm going to carry out. One is to calculate terminal value for all the positive cash flows. I repeat, using terminal value method, the first step is to calculate terminal value for all the positive cash flows. Then two, calculate modify internal rate of return using the modify internal rate of return formula. Using this formula, either this or this one, whichever one you use, we are going to get the same answer. Therefore, how do you then calculate your terminal value? How do you calculate your terminal value? So let's quickly go through that. Okay. Let me rub up this. So in fact, let's use an example in this material to demonstrate that, to calculate it. Okay. But first thing first, let me explain. So to use the terminal value, the first thing you are going to do is to calculate terminal value for each positive cash flows. Then step two, calculate the present value of negative cash flows. Then step three, you calculate the modified internal rate of return using any of the following, using this or use the other formula there. So whatever you have will be your modified internal rate of return. That's on one side. Using the present value method, the first thing you need to do, there are three procedures you are going to carry out. The first procedure is to calculate the present value of cash inflow. You keep it on one side. Then second step, you calculate the present value of cash outflow. Then step three, you calculate the modified internal rate of return using this big for nothing formula. All right, using that big formula. So once you are done, whether you use the present value method or you use terminal value method, you are going to get the same answer. So let's practice that. Let me see. I think I have illustrations on. Let me find a small illustration to that. Okay. Yes. Let's solve this question on illustration number 3 to demonstrate the modified internal rate of return. Illustration number 3. Let's go through it together. Let me see. Yes, Filipino PLC is considering an investment in a project which requires an immediate payment of 15,000 naira, followed by a further investment of 5,400 at the end of the first year. The subsequent return phase net cash inflows are expected to arise at the end of the following years. Require calculate the modified internal rate of return of these projects, assuming a reinvestment rate equal to the company's cost of capital of 8%. So examiner wants you to calculate modified internal rate of return. So with this, how am I going to calculate my modified internal rate of return? Like I explained to you earlier on, I can either use terminal value method or I use present value method. Please let me stop sharing and switch to the working notes. So, the name of this company is Filipino. Okay? PLC. Is it a PLC or a limited? PLC, yes. Filipino PLC. So we have to calculate modified internal rate of return. I would then say calculating modified internal rate of return. Remember what I said, you are at liberty to either use terminal value method or present value method. Whichever one you use, you are going to get the same answer. The present value method is mostly suitable if in the question you have to calculate net present value. Then number B, you now have to calculate modify internal rate of return. So it will be faster in that way to use the present value method. Instead of starting from beginning, you already have the present value. So it will be quicker for you to solve. Other than that, the two methods will achieve the same result. You are going to have the same answer. So in this one, using terminal value, for example, say we want to use terminal value. Please, on the day of your exam, in case you have modified internal rate of return, don't go and be writing using terminal value. So there's no need for that. Just go ahead, calculate your terminal value, get your modified internal rate of return and move on. No need to be saying using terminal value method. You are at liberty, to use anyone that is more convenient for you. So the terminal value is calculated the same way as we calculate present value. The only difference is just that instead of you to discount the cash flows, no, you are going to compound it. That's all. So I will create a column for here. Cash flow, description of items. I will have my cash flow. Then I will have compounding factor. Compounding factor. Then I will have the terminal value, TV. Okay. Under the compounding factor, you are supposed to use 1 plus R raised to power N. So you are compounding. Your compounding factor at, I will then go to the question. What is the cost of capital I'm supposed to use? Examiner said we should assume a reinvestment rate as cost of capital of 8%. So if that is the case, I will then go to the question. I need to have, remember, you only calculate terminal value for positive cash flows. You calculate terminal value for positive cash flow. You don't calculate terminal value for negative cash flow. It is only cash inflows that you calculate terminal value for, because our assumption is that the cash flow to be generated by the project can be reinvested at the company cost of capital or reinvestment rate. So that is what we want to demonstrate. So you don't calculate terminal value for negative cash flow. It must be only positive cash flows. Please note that. I will then go back to the question, what are the positive cash flow given? We have positive cash flow for year 1 to 5, okay? The first year is 6,500 cash flow, 6,500, year 2, year 3, year 4, then year 5. Then in year 2, our cash inflow is 7,750, 7,750, 5,750. Then year 4, 4,750, 4,750, 3,750. So these are the positive cash flows that the projects will generate. So I need to calculate my compounding factor. So my compounding factor is the cost of capital we are to use is 8%. I would then say 1.08 raised to power my n. Pay attention to this. Remember, the assumption behind modifying internal rate of return is that the cash flow generated by the project should be reinvested at the company cost of capital, which means that the cash flow of this year one, I want to reinvest it. So in that case, you need to remove year one. Year one is not part of it because this cash flow will be achieved at the end of each year. The cash flow of 6,500 will be achieved at the end of year one. Therefore, at the end of the year one, you want to reinvest the 6,500. So you need to ask yourself, how many more years can you reinvest the 6,500? Of course, it has to be year one. From this year one, we can invest for year two, year three, year four, year five. So how many more years? 1, 2, 3, 4. I would then say raised to power 4. Again, if I want to, the cash flow of year two, how many more years can I reinvest it? The cash flow that I'll call in year two, how many more years? 3 more years. I would say 1.08 raised to power 3. The cash flow of year three, how many more years can I reinvest it? 2 years raised to power 2. The cash flow of year four, remove year four, how many more years? 1 year, 1.08 raised to power 1. Then the cash flow of year five, how many more years can I reinvest it? 0, 1.08 raised to power 8. Sorry, raised to power 0. Another way of doing it is that, okay, for you to get your compounding factor, you can say n minus 1. I repeat, to get your compounding factor, you can say 1 plus r raised to power n minus 1. N is the useful life of the project. The useful life of this project is equal to 5 years, isn't it? So I would then say 5 minus year 1. Okay, 5 minus year 1, it will give me 4. In year 2, it will be 5 minus year 2, which is 3. In year 3, it will be 5 minus 3, which is raised to power 2. In year 4, 5 minus 4, which is raised to power 1. In year 5, 5 minus 5 equal to 0. So you can also do it that way. So with this, if I want to get my terminal value, I have to start with the compounding factor. I would then say 1.08 raised to power 4 raised to power 4 equal. The answer I have on my calculator, I will use it to multiply 6,500. Sorry, 6,500, which is equal to 8843. Here is 8843. That's the terminal value at the end of year one. When I invest that 6,500 for the next 5 years, I'm going to get 8,843. Then again, for year two, compounding factor 1.08 raised to power 3 equal, then multiply by 7750 equal 9763. Here is 9763. Year 3, 1.08 raised to power 2 equal, then multiply by 5750 equal 6707. 6707. Then year 4 cash flow 1.08 raised to power 1 equal, multiply by 4750 equal 5130. 5130. Finally, year 5, 1.08. Anything raised to power 0 is equal to 1. So this one will give me 3750. 3750. Add everything together. That will produce the terminal value we are looking for. So I would then say 8843 plus 9763 plus 6707 plus 5130 plus 3750 equal 34193. Here is 34193. So that's the total terminal value. Now that I have the total terminal value, the second step for me to do is to calculate the present value of cash inflow. Remember, there are 3 stages when you are calculating modified internal rate of return using terminal value. The first stage or the first step is to calculate the terminal value of positive cash flows. The second step is to calculate the present value of cash outflows. Then the third step is to calculate modified internal rate of return using the right formula. So the second stage now is to calculate the present value of cash outflow. I would then say step 2, calculating present value of cash outflow. It is possible that you may have more than one negative cash flow in the question. In year 0, of course, that one is a given. You are going to have negative cash flow in year 0 because that's your investment phase. That's your development phase when you are pumping money into the project. It is also possible in between years, you may also have cash outflow. You may spend money on the project as well. Whichever the number of share, or whenever you have the negative cash flow, just bring them together, calculate the present value of the negative cash flow, then total the present value, use it to calculate your modified internal rate of return. So again, item cash flow discount factor at 8%, then the present value. Okay. In year 0, according to the question, the initial outlay, we are told that the project will require an immediate payment of 15,000 naira. That's the initial outlay, followed by a further investment of 5,400 at the end of the first year. So there is a 15,000 and then 5,400 for year 0 and year 1. Year 1, here is initial outlay. Here is cash outflow of 5,400. Here is 15,000. There's no need for you to come and put it in brackets because we are calculating the present value of cash outflow. So cash outflow has taken care of that. So don't come here and be putting brackets for each of them. So discount factor at 8% for year 1. Let's calculate that. 1.08 raised to power 1 minus equal 0.926. Here is 0.926. Here is 1. Discount factor at year 0 is 1. This will give me 15,000. Then 0.926 multiplied by 5,400 equal 5,000 naira. Here is 5,000 naira. When you add it together, that will give me 20,000 naira. So total present value for negative cash flow is 20,000 naira. So now that I've calculated the terminal value for the positive cash flows, I've also calculated present value for the negative cash flow. I can then go ahead to calculate my modified internal rate of return. I would then say modified internal rate of return is calculated as, if I like, I can say DO divided by DN raised to power 1 over N, or minus 1. multiply by 100 over 1. Okay? DO is the terminal value. DN is the present value of cash outflow. N is the useful life of the project. So I would then say modify internal rate of return equal to my DO is terminal value, and we got 34,193 naira as the terminal value. Divided by present value of cash outflow, which is 20,000 naira. All of this raised to power 1 over 5. The useful life of the project is 5 years, all minus 1. Okay, so modify internal rate of return equal. Then I will bring out my 1 divided by 5 is equal to 0.2. 1 divided by 5 is equal to 0.2. So if that is the case, I would then say 34,193 divided by 20,000 naira equal raised to power 0.2 equal minus 1 equal multiply by 100% equal 11.32. Here is 11.32%. Approximately modified internal rate of return is 11%. So this is how to calculate modified internal rate of return using terminal value method. If I want to use present value method, let's try that again using alternatively using present value method. Again, please don't go out on the day of your exam and be saying that I'll be writing down using present value method. You don't need all of that. Just give me do your calculation, give me the final answer. That's what the examiner requires of you, not don't go and be indicating any method you are using. You are at liberty to use any one you want. Okay, so using present value method, there are 3 steps that we are going to carry out. The first step is to calculate the present value of cash inflow. The second step, calculate present value of cash outflows. Step 3, calculate modified internal rate of return. So I want to calculate present value of cash inflows. I would then say year, item, cash flow, discount factor at 8%, PV. Year 1, 2, we have our positive cash flow is for 5 years. So 3, 4, 5 cash flow. Here is 6,750, 7,750, 5,750, 4,750, then 3,750. I think the first one is 6,500. Let me confirm. What did we use? Yes, 6,500 is the first year cash flow. $6,500. So we need discount factor for year 1, which is 0.926. I think we got this. That's what we got here. Yes, 0.926. Then let's do for year 2. I would then say 1.08 raised to power 2 minus equal. Sorry, there's an error there. 1.08 raised to power 2 minus equal 0.857. Here is 0.857. Year 3, 1.08 raised to power 3 minus equal 0.794. 794. Year 4, 1.08 raised to power 4 minus equal 0.735. Year 5, 1.08 raised to power 5 minus equal 0.681. So let's get the present value. So 65 multiplied by 0.926 equal 1619. 7750 multiplied by 0.857 equal 6642. Next, 5750 multiplied by 0.794 equal 4566. Year 4, 4750 multiplied by 0.735 equal 3491. Year 5, 3750 multiplied by 0.681 equal 2554. So let's get the present value together. I will expect that one of you would have gone ahead to add up the numbers, but alas, you are not interested. Plus 6642 plus 4566 plus 3491 plus 2554 equal 23272. Here is 23272. So that represents the total present value of the positive cash inflows. So we've already calculated negative present value of negative cash flow before, which is 20,000. Yeah, we've already calculated it before. So that's what we are going to use. But if we have not done it before, you have to do it this way also. The same way we got this 20,000, calculate the present value of cash outflow like that. So with this, I would then say modified internal rate of return is equal to the PV, present value of cash inflow. If I don't call it present value of cash inflow, it could also be called present value of return phase cash flows. Return phase cash flow, that's when the project is generating returns. Divided by the PV of cash outflow. That's all the development phase or investment phase cash flow. All of this raised to power 1 over n multiplied by 1 plus r. All of this minus 1. I call it big for nothing formula. It's just big. It's not difficult. Okay? Therefore, my modified internal rate of return will then be equal to the present value of cash inflow is 23,272. Present value of cash outflow we got is 20,000 naira up there, raised to power 1 over 5 multiplied by 1 plus the cost of capital. R is cost of capital of 8%. So 1.08. All of this minus 1. That's it. You can see it's not difficult. I would then say modified internal rate of return equal to, I'll bring out my calculator to say 23,272 naira divided by 20,000 equal, that's 1.1636 raised to power 0.2 equal, that's 1.03 whatever, then multiply by 1.08 equal minus 1 equal multiply by 100 equal 11.32%. This is 11.32%. Approximately, our modified internal rate of return is 11%. So this is how to calculate modified internal rate of return. I will repeat. When you want to calculate modified internal rate of return, there are two methods that you can use. You can either use terminal value method or you use present value method to get your modified internal rate of return. So using terminal value method, there are 3 steps you are going to carry out. The first step is to calculate the terminal value of positive cash flows. Second step is to calculate the present value of negative cash flows. Then step 3 is to calculate modified internal rate of return using modified internal rate of return formula. That's what we have done here. To get the positive terminal value of all the positive cash flows, we got 34,193 naira. We calculated the present value of cash outflow. We got 20,000 naira. Then we now proceed to the third step to calculate modified internal rate of return, and we got 11.32%. We also say, okay, let's use the present value method as well. Using present value method, there are 3 steps that you are going to carry out. The first step is to calculate the present value of cash inflow, only cash inflows, using the company cost of capital or reinvestment rate. If in the question, examiner specify that you should use reinvestment rate, in a situation whereby you are given reinvestment rate, you're also given the company cost of capital, please use the reinvestment rate, because modified internal rate of return can specify to the decision maker the reinvestment rate to be used for the project. So where you are given reinvestment rates, please use that one over the cost of capital. But where you are not given reinvestment rates, then the company cost of capital is what you should use as your discounting rate. So using the present value method, I said there are 3 procedures you are going to carry out. The first procedure is to calculate the present value of cash inflows, that is positive cash flows. In this case, we got 23,272 naira. Then step 2, you calculate the present value of cash outflows. The present value of cash outflow, we've calculated it before. That's why we did not calculate again. That's why we got 20,000 naira. Then step 3, calculate modified internal rate of return using the extended formula, which I usually call big for nothing formula. So, and at the same time, we got the same answer, which is 11.32. So this is how to calculate modified internal rate of return. Please, I need you to ask, if you have a question, let me know before we proceed to another one. Now, before you ask your question, there's a decision rule for modified internal rate of return. There is a decision rule. The decision rule for modified internal rate of return is the same thing as the decision rule under internal rate of return. That is, for independent projects, you accept if modified internal rate of return is greater than the company cost of capital. I repeat, for independent projects, accept if modified internal rate of return is greater than the company cost of capital. For mutually exclusive projects, accept any project with a higher modified internal rate of return. Okay? Accept any project with a higher modified internal rate of return, provided it is greater than or higher than the company cost of capital. Okay? Then where your modified internal rate of return is equal to your company cost of capital, you can either accept or reject the project based on other qualitative factors. Okay? So these are the decision rules under modified internal rate of return. So I'll stop sharing this working notes. Let's go back to the main notes. Again, please ask your question. Let me know if you have any question for me. Let me know if you have any question for me. If there's none, then we need to go ahead with our discussion. Okay? So we just finished modified internal rate of return explanation. Please go ahead and read the advantages of modified internal rate of return. Go and read the advantages. All right? So before we go to relevant cash flow, let us explain. Let's discuss the non-discounted cash flow method. Non-discounted cash flow method. Under the non-discounted cash flow method, we said that we have payback period. We also have accounting rate of return. So let us discuss payback period. Payback period is the period usually expressed in years in which it takes cash inflow to equate cash outflows in capital investments. I repeat, payback period is the period usually expressed in years in which it takes cash inflow to equate cash outflow in capital investment. The payback period is a measure of liquidity. Payback period is a measure of liquidity. That is, how quick, how soon can a company recover or recoup the amount invested in a project? So, it should be noted that payback period uses cash flow, unlike accounting rate of return, which uses accounting profit or loss. I repeat, payback period uses cash flow, unlike accounting rate of return that uses accounting profit or loss. So how do you then calculate payback period? Calculating payback period. There are two ways you can calculate your payback period. You can either use formula method or you use tabular method. Whichever one you use, you are going to get the same answer. So, but the formula method is only used where you have constant cash inflow. Okay? The formula method is used where you have constant cash flow. In that case, payback period will be calculated as cash outflows divided by constant cash inflow. Of course, must be expressed in years because we said payback period is the period usually expressed in years in which it takes cash inflow to equate cash outflows in capital investment. So where you have constant or regular cash flows, constant cash inflows, that's when you use the formula method. That's when you use the formula method, where you have constant cash inflows, okay? But where you have the irregular cash inflows, you cannot use constants. You cannot use formula. Rather, you are going to use tabular method because your cash inflows are irregular. Say, for example, in this table, you can see that the initial outlay is 100,000 naira using tabular method. So this project will generate cash inflow of 40,000 in year 1, 70,000 in year 2, then 30,000 in year 3. With this information, if I want to calculate my payback period, starting from year 0, I have balance of 100,000 naira. 100,000 minus 40,000 naira will give me 60,000. The next cash inflow is 70,000. Where you get to a point whereby the outstanding balance is lower than the next cash inflow, you put a dash and calculate your payback period. Therefore, you need to ask yourself, how many years have you recovered? You've only recovered for only 1 year, and that's why you are seeing one there. What is my outstanding balance? Outstanding balance is 60,000. Numerator. The next cash inflow is 70,000. Denominator. When you multiply, when you divide and add to 1, we got 1.86 years, which means that this project will pay back within 2 years. The project will pay back within 2 years. So this is how to calculate payback period. All right, using tabular method. We are going to use, as we proceed, we are going to solve a bigger question than this. All right, so this is how to calculate payback period. Using regular, where there's regular cash inflow, you use that formula. Where there's no constant cash inflow or irregular cash inflow, you use tabular method. So what is the decision rule under payback period? What's the decision rule? For independent projects, accept if payback period is equal to or shorter than the management predetermined payback period. I repeat, for independent projects, accept if the calculated payback is shorter or equal to the management predetermined payback period. Number B, for mutually exclusive projects, accept any project with a shorter payback period, provided it is equal to the management predetermined payback period. Now, the issue is that for the acceptability of projects using payback period, the acceptability of project is based on management predetermined payback period. I repeat, under payback period, the acceptability of a project is dependent on the management predetermined payback period. What this means is that if the management intended payback period is not given to you, there will be no basis for the acceptability of the project. So in that situation, you cannot advise whether the project should be accepted or not. So watch out, because you don't benchmark, you don't accept a project on the basis of useful life of a project. No, it has to be based on the management predetermined payback. This is because management may say that, okay, for us to be able to accept any project, we should be able to recover our money within the next 2 years, or within the next 3 years, or within the next 5 years. So that is the management predetermined payback period. So you need to compare your calculated payback period with that management predetermined payback period. So if your calculated payback period is shorter or equal to the management predetermined payback period, then you say the project is financially viable and should be considered. All right. But if it is not equal to the management predetermined payback period, you say the project is not, if it is greater than the management predetermined payback period, you say the project is not financially viable and should be rejected. So these are the decision rule under payback period. Okay. So, of course, you can just go ahead and read about the advantages and disadvantages of a payback period for knowledge sake. You never can tell though, but again, at this level, I don't see your examiner asking you to be stating advantages and disadvantages of a payback period. So let's talk about accounting rate of return. Let's talk about accounting rate of return. The accounting rate of return is also known as return on capital employed or return on investment. It's a technique that uses accounting information as shown in the financial statement of a company. I repeat, accounting rate of return is a technique that uses accounting information as shown in the financial statement of a company. The ARR, the accounting rate of return, is a measure of profitability unlike payback period that measures liquidity. So the accounting rate of return is a measure of profitability, and it uses accounting profit or loss. The accounting rate of return does not use cash flow. I repeat, accounting rate of return does not use cash flows. It uses accounting profit or loss, which means that if cash flows are given to you and you are asked to calculate accounting rate of return, you need to convert the cash flows to accounting profit or loss. So how do you then convert cash flow to accounting rate of return? To convert cash flow to accounting profit or loss, I will say profits or loss equal to the cash flow given to you minus depreciation, minus annual depreciation. This will give me accounting profit or loss. So I repeat, if cash flow is given to you in a question and you are asked to calculate accounting rate of return, you need to convert the cash flow to accounting profit, because you don't use cash flow to calculate accounting rate of return. Rather, you need accounting profit or loss to calculate accounting rate of return. So if cash flow is given to you, you need to convert it to cash flow. You need to convert it to accounting profit or loss. How do you calculate your profit or loss? Your profit or loss will be equal to your cash flow less depreciation. I hope that is taken. Now, how do you then calculate your accounting rate of return? Accounting rate of return is calculated as average annual profits, average annual profits divided by average investment, or multiplied by 100 over 1. So how do you get your average annual profits? I just explained. Average annual profits will be calculated as total profits divided by useful life. Total profit divided by useful life. How do you get your total profits? Your total profit will be the profit of each year. Your cash flow minus depreciation for the first year, cash flow minus depreciation second year, cash flow minus depreciation the third year, on and on like that. So the profits you have for the respective year, you add them together. That will give you your total profit. You divide it by the useful life of the project. That will give you your average annual profit. Once you get your average annual profit, then you need to go ahead and calculate the average investment. Average investment. The average investment is the initial cost of the project, the initial outlay plus scrap value. Then, of course, divide by 2. Okay? The initial outlay of the project plus the scrap value divided by 2 will give you your average investment. When you want, in most cases, examiner will not give to you depreciation. Of course, you know the formula for depreciation already. Depreciation is calculated as the cost of the project. Depreciation equals to the cost of the project minus the scrap value divided by the useful life of the project. Okay, that will give you the depreciation, annual depreciation. So these are the relevant formulas that you can use to calculate your accounting rate of return. These are straightforward kind of technique, something you have done previously under performance management. So what's the decision rule? What's the decision rule under accounting rate of return? For independent projects, accepts if IRR is greater than the company, accept if IRR is greater than or equal to management predetermined ARR. Okay? Accepts if ARR is greater than, that is, if your calculated ARR is greater than or equal to the management's predetermined ARR. Then number B, for mutually exclusive projects. For mutually exclusive projects, accept any project with a higher ARR, provided it is equal to or greater than the management predetermined ARR. All right. So there's something you should notice in this non-discounted cash flow method. under payback period and then accounting rate of return, you will notice that our calculator figures are benchmarked against the management predetermined numbers. So you need to note that whenever you are using non-discounted cash flow method, either payback period or accounting rate of return, your calculated numbers should be compared with the management predetermined numbers. So in each of the method, if you are calculating, for example, for payback period, if you are not given the management predetermined ARR, sorry, payback period, there will be no basis for the acceptability of the project. The same thing under accounting rate of return. If you are not given the management targeted ARR, there will be no basis for the acceptability of the project because you need to compare your calculated numbers with the management targeted numbers. All right. If management targeted numbers are not given to you, there will be no basis. Okay. There will be no basis for the acceptability. So these are the things you need to just a refresher. It's something you have done previously under performance management. Again, go ahead and read about the advantages and disadvantages of accounting rate of return. They are there in your material. Okay. Now, before we close for today, let's talk about relevant cash flows. Let's talk about relevant cash flows. Let me pause a little bit. If you have any question for me, any questions so far? If there are no questions, I will stop sharing this. Let's go to our working notes so that I can explain to you relevant cash flows. Let's talk about relevant cash flows. Okay. Let me stop sharing this. Okay. So relevant. After this, we stop for today. Relevant cash flows. Now, it is important for you to understand how to identify relevant cash flows in a question, because on the day of your exam, the questions, the scenario, a scenario will be painted, and then examiner will scatter the question for you. Different variables will be given to you in the question, and then you have responsibility to be able to identify which of the variables given to you are relevant, which one are not relevant. It is your responsibility. Examiner cannot tell you. And that's why examiner is the ones, testing your understanding. They want to know your knowledge of the subject matter. So it is important for you to understand how to identify relevant cash flows. Okay? So let's take it one after the other. What do you mean by relevant cash flow? Relevant cash flow are the receipts and payments. Let me put it down for you. Relevant cash flow, these are the receipts and payments associated with a project under consideration. Okay. In the determination of the financial viability of a project, in the determination of financial viability of a project, the following items should be examined critically. So, number one, variable cost. Number two, fixed cost. Number three, historical cost, historical or sunk cost. Number four, incremental. Before that, let me replace them. Incremental slash direct slash specific slash attributable fixed cost. Historical or sunk cost. Number five, depreciation. Amortization or provision. Number six, we are going to talk about interest. Number seven, opportunity cost. Number eight, working capital. Okay, so these are the items. Let me explain them. Let's discuss them one by one. Because on the day of your exam, some of these items will be given to you in a question. So if you don't know if you don't know which is which, you are going to struggle to be able to answer the question correctly. So let's take them one after the other. The first item is variable cost. Variable costs are costs that vary according to activity level. Variable costs are costs that varies according to activity level. It is also known as marginal costs or direct costs. Examples of variable costs include direct material, direct labor, direct expenses, and variable part of production. So if in a question you are given direct material, direct labor, direct expenses, or variable overhead, you should know that those are variable costs. Those are variable costs or marginal costs. Variable costs are relevant costs. You should consider it. You have to include it. When you see direct material, direct labor, direct expenses, or variable overhead, they are relevant. You have to account for it. Number two, fixed costs. Fixed costs are costs that have no sympathy for activity level. I repeat, fixed costs are costs that have no sympathy for activity level. That is, irrespective of number of units produced, the fixed cost does not change. It remains the same, except fixed cost is irrelevant cash flow, except it is incremental in nature. I repeat, when you see fixed cost in a question, please, it is not relevant. You have to ignore it, except it is incremental in nature. If you are told that the fixed cost will increase, that additional fixed cost that will be incurred is relevant. You have to account for it. Other than that, fixed cost is irrelevant. There are three different ways in which an examiner can test fixed cost in a question. If you are given fixed cost if examiner paints a scenario and you are given fixed cost, say for example, fixed cost 10,000, no further information, you should know that that 10,000 is irrelevant. You have to ignore it. And another way examiner can test fixed cost in a question is that you may be given. Examiner may tell you that fixed cost, including depreciation, is 10,000 naira. Examiner has told you that that fixed cost of 10,000 naira included depreciation. That means examiner wants you to do something. You need to go ahead and calculate annual depreciation and less it from the 10,000. Whatever you have thereafter is relevant. You have to consider it. I repeat, if in a question you are given fixed cost of 10,000 naira, you are now told, examiner told you that fixed cost including depreciation, it means that you must calculate depreciation and less it from the fixed cost. So whatever balance you have represents relevant fixed cost. At times, examiner may also tell you, the third one is that you may be told that fixed cost, excluding depreciation, is 10,000 naira. Fixed cost, excluding depreciation, is 10,000. Examiner has told you that this fixed cost will exclude the non-cash item. Therefore, if you are given fixed cost that exclude depreciation, that fixed cost is relevant, you have to account for it. So those are the three ways examiner can test you under fixed cost. Now, if in a question you are given incremental fixed cost or direct fixed cost or specific fixed cost or attributable fixed cost, they are all relevant. Examiner can tell you that fixed cost is 10,000 naira. This fixed cost is specific to this project, or this fixed cost is directly related to this project, or this fixed cost is attributable to this project. You know, so once you are given such a situation, then you should know that that fixed cost is relevant. You have to account for it. The fourth one, historical cost. Historical costs are the original amount of the item. Okay. The historical cost is the original amount incurred on the item. Historical cost is a past cost, it's a sunk cost, and therefore irrelevant. What are the examples of historical cost or past cost? Examples include market survey costs, research and development, okay? Development cost. So when you see such a cost in the question, you should know that they are not relevant. You have to ignore it, okay? Historical costs are irrelevant costs and should be ignored. I've told you already the examples of historical costs include market survey cost, okay? Market survey cost or feasibility study cost, research and development, or simply put, development cost. When you see that in a question, they are usually irrelevant and should be ignored. The fifth one, depreciation. Depreciation is not cash flow. When in the determination of financial viability of a project, when you are given depreciation, please, you have to ignore, because depreciation is not cash outflow. It's not a cash item. It does not involve movement of cash. Therefore, you ignore depreciation. It shouldn't be included in the calculation. Number 6 is interest. Interest is the actual amount paid on the loan borrowed, or you can say interest is the compensation required by the providers of debt capital. All right. So the absolute amount of interest is irrelevant and should be ignored. I repeat, the absolute amount of interest is irrelevant and should be ignored. Why? Because the cost of capital that will be used to discount the future cash flows already included interest. You know, when we did cost of capital, we calculated cost of equity, cost of preference share, cost of debt. Under the cost of debt, you know, we use interest. That's when you calculated after tax cost of debt, when you minus tax from your, to get your post-tax interest. So in the calculation of the weighted average cost of capital, you've already included the interest. So if you are now considering the absolute amount of interest in the calculation of your NPV or in the determination of financial viability, it will amount to double dipping. It means that you are treating interest twice, because in the cost of capital, you already have interest. Then in your cash flow, you're also including interest. It means that you are treating interest twice, so which will be wrong. So whenever you are given absolute amount of interest in a question, please ignore. Absolute amount of interest, what I simply mean by that is the naira amount. Say, for example, 50,000 naira. So this 50,000 naira is absolute amount of interest. You don't consider it, you don't use it when you are calculating, when you want to determine the financial viability of a project. When you are given naira amount of interest, please ignore. It is not relevant. Ignore it, because the cost of capital you want to use to discount the future cash flow already included interest. So I'll move to the next one, which is opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the benefit forgone as a result of decision taking. Okay, I repeat, opportunity cost is the benefit forgone as a result of decision taking. So opportunity cost is a relevant cost, you have to account for it. Opportunity cost is a relevant cash flow, you have to account for it. It should be considered. All right. Then lastly, we need to talk about working capital. Okay, we need to talk about working capital. Working capital represents the difference between current asset and current liability. It is the amount required for the day-to-day running of a business. However, in the determination of financial viability of a project, working capital should be treated as follows, depending on whether there's a one-off working capital or there is incremental working capital. So where there is a one-off working capital, one-off working capital, then we have incremental working capital. So for a one-off working capital, working capital should be treated as cash outflow in the year before the year of occurrence and recover fully at the end of the useful life. I repeat, in the determination of financial viability of a project, if a one-off working capital is given, it should be treated as cash outflow in the year before the year of occurrence and recover fully at the end of the useful life. What do I mean by that? Say, for example, you are given a working capital of 500 naira. That's a working capital of 500 naira or 500 million in the first year. Okay? You are given a working capital of 500 million naira in the first year. Say, for example, this project has 3 years life. Okay? This project has 3 years life. Therefore, how do I treat this working capital of 500 million that occurred in the first year? The rule says that when there's a one-off working capital, it should be treated as cash outflow in the year before the year of occurrence and recover fully at the end of the useful life. So we have year 0, year 1, year 2, year 3. I want to treat the working capital. I would then say working capital. Because this working capital of 500 million occurs in year 1, I will not put it in year 1. Year before year 1 is year 0. I will then come here and say 500 million. This 500 million is a cash outflow because we said that a one-off working capital should be treated as cash outflow in the year before the year of occurrence. So put it in brackets. Then at the end of the useful life, which is year 3, it should be recovered fully. 500. So it should be recovered fully. You can see I've recovered my 500, which is equal to 0. 500 minus 500 is equal to 0. So this is how to treat working capital, even though by the time I discount this 500, it should be different because the 500 in year 1, discount factor at year 0 is equal to 1. Discount factor at year 3 will be lower than 1. So I'm not going to recover the present value of the same amount. So there will be difference, okay? But the bottom line is that your cash flow must be recovered to 0 at the end of the day for your working capital. So I repeat, when there's a one-off working capital, it should be treated as cash outflow in the year before the year of occurrence. Like these hypothetical numbers, we said this 500 million occurs in year 1. So you can see I did not record it in year 1. Rather, I recorded it in year 0 because year 0 is the year before year 1. So that's why I recorded it there. Say, for example, you are told that this 500 million occurs in year 3. Okay? The 500 million occurs in year 3. Again, I will not record it in, I will then say, of course, this will not be in year 1 again. I will then comment. Let me use another example. So working capital. We are told that this working capital occurs in year 3. So year 3 is a year before year 3 is year 2. I will then come here. I will say 500 million should be treated as cash outflow. So in the final year, I need to recover it. I will then say 500. I've recovered it, which is equal to 0 at the end of the day. So this is how to treat a one-off working capital. Number last, incremental working capital. When you are given incremental working capital, how do you treat it? Incremental working capital. How do you treat incremental working capital? The incremental working capital should be treated the same way as a one-off working capital, except that only the increments should be considered. Okay, I repeat, the incremental working capital should be treated the same way as a one-off working capital, except that only the increment should be considered. For example, if there's a working capital, we are given a working capital for year 1, year 2, year 3 for simplicity. So we are given a working capital for year 1 of, say, 200. In year 2, it has increased to 250. In year 3, it has increased to 300. So for me to now determine my working capital, I would then say working capital for year 1 is 200. It has increased from, you can see, from 200 to 300, my working capital has increased. So between year 1 and year 2, the difference is 50. Between year 2 and year 3, the difference is 50. So my total working capital will then be equal to 300. Therefore, my relevant year will then be the one that occurred in year 1 should be treated as cash outflow in year 0. This one will be cash outflow in year 0. The one that occurred in year 2 should be treated as cash outflow in year 1. The one that occurs in year 3 should be treated as cash outflow in year 2. Then at the final year, which is year 3, I will recover the total working capital. You can see 200 plus 50 will give me 300. I've recovered the entire 300. So where there is incremental working capital, it should be treated as cash outflow in the year before the year of occurrence and recover fully at the end of the useful life. However, only the increment should be considered. Only the increment is considered. So in relation to your professional exam, in most cases, you are going to see incremental working capital. In recent time, whenever you have question under capital budgeting, there's usually working capital and it's usually an incremental working capital. So we are going to test different scenario questions, then you'll be able to see how to calculate working capital in a question. So this is where we are going to draw the curtain for today. And then in our next class, by the grace of God, we are going to talk about inflation, impact of inflation and taxation. Then I will provide you with a columnar format, which we are going to use to calculate questions, to solve questions. Then thereafter, we proceed to illustrations. Within the next 2 periods, we are going to be having illustrations, all right? So let me hear from you if you have any question for me today before we close it. Any question for me, please?